Hi everyone, join me this afternoon in my studio at home where I'm going to do a watercolour demonstration. The aim is to do a snow scene using three primary colours, a little bit of neutral tint. The paper is Arch 300-pound rough. Usual array of brushes, large brush for the big bits, a little brush for the little bits, and a medium-sized brush for the bits in the middle. Usual palette, mixed up paints ready to go, and slight drawing just to give a few marks, some buildings, some farm buildings that you won't be able to see until I paint them because they're drawn very lightly. Tree on the right, tree on the left to sort of lead you into the composition. So there we go. Let's get on with it. A little bit of speed painting, as it is always with watercolour. So it's paint fast, think slowly. So planning and preparation, bit of masking tape across the paper there just to mark out the horizon, and then the sky area, and then the foreground, middle distance, and then the background we're daubing. So my colours are all mixed up, so let's crack on. A little bit of water onto the big brush, and I'm just applying the water so that it runs down. You see I've turned the board round just so that the water will run down so that the whole lot's going vertical, and then the sky can just be literally dabbed in. So a little bit of blue at the top, and I'm just going to let gravity do the job here. Little bits of white coming through. Quick clean off of the brush, wipe on the kitchen roll, and then a little bit of warmth here down the centre of the sky. So I've made a mix here of lemon yellow, cadmium red, just so that I get a nice sort of raw sienna sort of colour. Just going down the centre of the sheet, down the centre of the sky. Now going over to a purple colour I've mixed up using cadmium red and a little bit of ultramarine blue, and we're just going to let that run down, and the other side there as well. And again, just let gravity do all the work for you. Just tease it down to the horizon there a little bit. I'm trying to carefully cut around those buildings, those farm buildings. Just going in a bit gently around there. Remember what I say during the workshops in the gallery is always mix up more paint than you think you're going to need, because you can guarantee if you don't, you'll run out. So always good to have plenty of paint ready to go, because if you mix up or try and mix up the same colour again, you can pretty much guarantee you just won't get the same colour. Okay, so I'm going to leave that. I'm not going to, in fact, I'm going to lie. I'm just going to add a little bit of neutral tint in, just to give a little bit of dark cloud up here before it all dries. So this is just pure neutral tint. Obviously the brush is damp, just so we've got a little bit of dark cloud shadow coming down on that side. Okay, so quick rinse of the brush, wipe the brush off, leave the board like that for a minute. Don't be tempted to turn the board over. You turn the board over too quick and then the colours will run down into each other and you'll lose the effect that we're trying to get here today. So just going to take a little bit of the kitchen roll, just wipe off any runs, leave that, and it's time for a bit more planning and preparation. Just going to mix up a pale mix of ultramarine blue. So I've got ultramarine blue mixed up, and I'm going to mix up some more of that purple colour, but slightly stronger than I had in the sky, just to create the background trees. So I'm working my way from the back to the front of the painting. Just a quick check of that. It's quite warm in here today because it's a nice sunny day. A bit chilly outside in the wind, but in here it's okay. That'll be okay now. So I'm going to turn the board over. Hopefully you can now see the effects in the sky. Nice and simple, nice and quick. Now before this area here dries too much, I've gone to the medium-sized brush, and I just want to create now the tree line that's behind these buildings at the back here, cutting in very, very carefully around the buildings, which does actually make them stand out a little bit more. And then a distant tree line. As you can see, the paint actually is getting drawn up into the colour above because it still hasn't completely dried. So this just creates a nice dark colour at the back there, a sort of mid-tone purple. And it creates this tree line that we're trying to get here. Take that right the way across. Hopefully on the camera now you can see this a little bit clearer. You can see the buildings now starting to stand out. There's little silhouettes there. So we've got 2 host houses and then some farmhouses. Just in with a little bit of neutral tint just down the sides there, just so that tonally it's a little bit darker either side of the buildings, and cutting round the buildings again. That just makes them stand out. So sort of a focal point, if you like. This is where we've got this group of buildings here. In front of the buildings, a hedge or a hedge line. So we just tap that in. And something again a little bit darker. I'm just rolling up there just to create a large tree sort of mass shadow colour, and then we'll put something else over the top of that in a minute. Again, it just breaks up that sort of long line along there. Whilst I've got this colour as well, I can just sort of start to draw out the buildings a little bit more now. So there we are, there's the edges of the houses. I say it's quite small, so I'll do a close-up as we go through the painting. Usually a point where I'd ask if there's any questions, but I guess you'll just have to email those or message me at the bottom of the video. Okay. So again, I've got to let that dry before I take this masking tape off, because if I don't, what will happen is any sort of little runs of paint will just run down, and we don't want that just yet. So I'm just going to mix up this pale blue. I think that's okay now, so I can remove the masking tape. Then we have the fields leading in. Now we just need to create some middle distance, and I'm using the brush and the paper to sort of its best advantage really. Just gently just gliding from the edges into the centre with this pale mix of blue. So I've got that sparkle of white still coming through the paper. Just going to take it up on the right side there. Any sort of hard edges, I've just sort of softened those off. So that's, if you like, the first part of the painting done. It's sort of down already, and there's already the start of a painting going on here, and that's just after what, 7 minutes. So that's pretty good going. Always working from light to dark, so all the lightest colours are down, they're on now, so I can sort of move forward and start to think about some of the middle distance and what I'm going to put in there, and start to think about mixing up the colours for them. So I'll just take the middle sized brush just to mix up with, and I'm going to want some different tones really. So I'm going to want some dark tones. So again, mixing up a very dark purple, using the ultramarine blue, cadmium red, Remember, cadmium red's very strong. It will always try and overpower. So I can't show you the mixes because it'll all run off if I hold it up vertical for you to see. And then I want a very dark green as well. So taking some of the lemon yellow and into that I'll add a little bit of neutral tint. So it's lemon yellow, neutral tint. I get a very dark green. And then to warm it up, an orangey colour. So similar to what we had in the sky, but perhaps just a little bit redder, just so that we put a little bit of warmth as well into the bushes. Okay, so I've got really now 4 mixes on the go. I've got the ultramarine blue, which is just pure, an orange colour mixed up from lemon yellow, cadmium red, a dark green, neutral tint, a little bit of lemon yellow, and a dark purple, which is made from the cadmium red, ultramarine blue. As I say, it's nice and warm in here, thankfully, so it's drying very quickly, which is just what I want. And then we'll start to mark in now. I'm going to take the green colour to start with, and I just want to mark out where the trees are going to go. So I've got one on the left here, and then I've got another one on the right. So being right-handed myself, I find it easier to work from the left to the right. Come down to about a finger's width from the horizon line, and then we just start to bulk this out and make it look like a winter tree. So I've got the trunk there going down, and then just fatten it out a little bit. It's got lots of ivy and stuff growing up on the side there. A few branches, lower branches. I just nicely break the horizon line up. Stay with this brush for a little while. And then a little bit of neutral tint, pure neutral tint down this side, just to make it a little bit darker at the bottom coming out. And then to create this hedge, sort of a hedge line that just sort of leads the eye over this way. So I'm just marking that in with a few brush marks, a few dark marks that just sort of help to lead the eye in on this side. Straight into the orangey colour, which mixes quite nicely with the other colours. So it's just all bleeding in together, which is just what we want really on the watercolour. Take that a little bit higher up there. A little bit more of the green. Got this nice little hedge just sort of taking us out into the middle distance. Just leave that for the time being now to dry. I'll come back to that in a minute, so we don't want to smudge it. So over to the other side, load up again, same thing, but this tree's slightly closer, so the roots, if you like, are sort of anchored into the ground there. And just keep it nice and simple, keep the shape simple to start with, but you can always bulk it out. So start with a fairly vertical sort of straight line. Just gently, as you can see that my brush marks are going from the tree trunk when they go out for the branches, they go outwards. Okay, so don't be tempted to sort of go in. Always sort of try and work out from the center of the tree to the left and to the right. So like that, or in this case like that. Okay, so there we go. This is much bigger, this tree, because it's switched to the smaller brush soon. So again, a little bit of dark color now, just down the side there. This is that dark purple, which when mixed with the green is just making a very dark tone really. I say you haven't got to worry too much about the colours, it's more about the tones in a snow scene. You know, we're more interested in the lights and the darks. Don't get sort of too hung up about it having a brown trunk and green or whatever. It's just make it nice and dark, and the viewer will sort of fill in all the gaps. Branch come out that way, everyone just hanging down there. Bob Ross would say, lots of happy trees, only just doing 2. Come back over while I've got it on there. Just add a few more in. And then the same thing here. Not quite a, we haven't got a hedge line on this side. All we've got is just, if you like, the edge of a field where there'll be a few posts in a minute, a few sort of fence posts again that just help to lead the eye in down to about that point there. And then again, we're going to just break up that line with another tree line just in front here. Again, using the purple colour, which again is just a mix of the cadmium red, ultramarine blue, I'm just going to mark that in where I want that to go. So that's just going to go across there. So that's basically the baseline for this second tree line. And because the colour behind now is now dried, this paint just will sit nicely over the top of that. We'll give it another coat, but that's just going to just create this sense of distance. Carefully cutting around that branch, around the tree. It would have probably been easier. You're thinking, why didn't you do that before you did the tree, Mike? Yeah, well, if I do it again, I probably will. Planning and preparation, eh? Into the darker colour that I've already got, just put that at the bottom. Now I've dried the brush off with a bit of kitchen roll. I just want this next colour to be a fairly dry mix, so less water, more paint. So again, it's just the purple again. I just want to create some tree shapes here. And what I'm going to do is just, yet again, let the paper do the work for me. So I'm just gently pulling the paint over the grain of the paper. A bit more on the side there. Just to create this tree line. Then just make that same colour just a little bit damper, and we'll go back to that first tree line and basically do the same thing, just very, very gently, just tapping in another colour over the top of the first colour. Well, the same colour, just by putting it over the top again, tonally, it just creates a different tone. So it creates this sense of distance, a bit of aerial perspective. It also helps to frame the farm buildings there at the back. I'm sure you can see now how this is getting gradually darker and darker. So I'm just going to add a little bit more here just to create, it's looking a bit too even, it's looking like they're going downhill, so let's just break that up with a larger tree in the centre there, and then just pull down some tree trunks into it, a few branches without overdoing it. Often say, if you think, should I? The answer is probably no. So if you're ever considering doing something, have a think about it. You can always go in later and add dark to over the top of the light, so your problems will get resolved that way. And it's quite nice working with this limited palette because you're not having to think about too many colours. all you've got to think about is tones, which is great in a snow scene. Just the blue again, this is exactly the same blue. I haven't made it darker or anything like that, so it's just getting added over. Light's coming down that way. It's just throwing a little bit of winter shadow. So a little bit darker on this side, just down through there. And the same over this side. A few ruts here in the field that just created using the blue again. So these are fun to do, even if you've been painting in watercolour for years. It's always fun just to get out the colours and just have a play and see what you can come up with. But especially for beginners, it's a great way to start because you haven't got too much to think about. The most important thing is spend your money on the paper every day. Okay, so again, I'm just going to let those areas dry. I'm going to make that a little bit darker in a minute. Not too dark, but just another little row of bushes over the top. And I'm going to carry on now with these trees, which is really sort of sculpting the trees. So mixing up this dark green colour again. Just using lemon yellow, a little bit of neutral tint so I get a nice dark colour, nice dark green. And now I'm going to resort to the rigger, the smallest brush, just because I want to create nice thin branches coming out now. So I'm just going to, again, I'm letting the paper do some of the work for me, so it's a little bit sort of hit and miss. So you're never going to see every branch. All you want to see is basically the shape of the tree. So don't get sort of too hung up about doing every single branch. All the small branches, we'll cover those in a minute. If it makes this area a little bit darker, that's good. And if you can hear Dad on cue there, the guy's got out his electric saw next door. Right. Just taking some pure neutral tint now and just making some real dark marks down here that really sort of do stand out. As the painting comes forward, you want it to be a little bit darker in the foreground. At the back there, we just want a little bit of mystery. And leave that for now. There's always this danger of wanting to overdo it, so I'm just being careful that I don't overdo it. Okay, 20 minutes in. That's okay. And just do the same on this tree as well now. Again, I'm just sort of teasing out from the centre of the painting. Or the centre of the tree, I should say. Just to create the shape of all the different branches. Just tease that run down there. Again, a bit of pure neutral tint just to make it a little bit darker down that side there. Don't know if you saw, but you can see this tree line I put in is still a little bit on the damp side. So some of the tree just bled over. So one of my golden rules is patience. So you have to have a bit of patience. Just wait for that to dry before I go back down to here and do anything, because clearly it's just not ready yet. There's just lots of little branches coming off here. Again, I'm going to make some of them a little bit darker. And just tease some of those ones over there. thing to remember is trees are always much bigger than we think they are. And it's not really until you start to paint and really sort of look at trees and you suddenly think, blimey, they're so much bigger. I'll show you quickly, whilst that's just drying, I'll show you an example. This is an oil painting that I did this morning, so it's still quite wet. But these trees here, painting these trees, they're absolutely enormous. So, you know, you really do have to sort of think about the scale. Then as they go back, obviously they get smaller and smaller as they go back through the landscape. Okay, so just turn that around so you can have a see. And to put that back in the drying rack, there we go. Again, just sort of adding a bit more darker tone just at the bottom there. It's all helping to lead the eye over to there. Now, I could spend ages doing this tree and getting all the different branches in, but as long as I've got the crux of it down to start with, I'm going to be quite happy with that. But I'm just going to take it up much, as I just said, much higher. And of course, the other thing is they're often they're much more fatter than we think they are around the tree trunk. A little bit more neutral tint there, just to put in some darker tones down through here. And some little brush marks coming out. Get this side. Hope no one's fallen off to sleep yet and you're still sort of concentrating, and you can have a go at this yourself. It makes up in some small way for not being able to do the classes in the gallery, but chances are I'm probably painting much quicker than I would in the gallery as well. So hopefully you can just sort of keep going back and referring to this video if you need to. Okay, I'm just starting now to add a little bit of detail to these buildings, not too much, but just a little bit. Just taking a little bit of that orangey colour, and I'm just going to put that onto the post houses there, onto the what would be the brickwork, and again onto that side of that building there. I'm trying to leave the roofs of the buildings white, really, using the white of the paper, just so that it looks like I've got snow on the roofs there. Just using a little bit of purple again now, so. Seagulls in the background, dog barking, power tools, everything you need when you want a little bit of concentration at home. Just let all that bleed in, just suggested all. Let's make up a nice dark green to go in there as well. Just add a little bit of green, just breaks up all that purple. And using this little brush, leaving little white areas there for the snow and the hedge. Bit of a dark colour there just for the windows. Don't get too hung up about those sort of things. It's just little suggestions, that's all you need. Don't get sort of too bogged down with windows and doors and things like that. Just the odd suggestion here and there is all that's needed. So it's all leading the eye in. That's starting to dry. My tree's trunk is still a little bit wet, so just going to check that. Just add a little bit of paint just down the side there. If it bleeds over to the right, I know it's still too wet, and it's bleeding over to the right. So I'd obviously made that much wetter than I thought I had. Okay, whilst that's drying, let's just mix up a nice dark brown colour. Just using a little bit of red, a little bit of yellow. So we've just got a little bit of brown coming in through there, sort of a reddy brown. A little bit of earth just sort of popping up through the snow. A little bit of warmth as well into the painting. Again, use that same colour. I'm just tapping over the top of that little hedgerow there. And again, it just warms it up a little bit. Bring the sort of reddy warm colours to the foreground. Some darker sort of tones down the side there. The danger is, this is just using neutral tint. You have to be so careful, you could end up sort of outlining everything, and we don't want that. So it's just so it sort of blends in with these darker colours on this side, just to make those tones a little bit darker. Could keep the purple going. Notice there's been a lot of work done now with the rigger. This is where the rigger sort of comes into its own at this sort of stage of the painting, for me anyway. It's just when I'm sort of adding in these little sort of, you know, dare I say it, details. All the little bits that just sort of pull the painting together. Make sure that's all nice and dry there. Now, let's just take some of that dark brown, mix it with the neutral tint so we get a very, very dark brown colour. And just add in some fence posts over this side. Again, they just help to lead the eye down, getting closer together as they go further away. Just down to that point there, stick another post over there, one in the hedge line. So again, just the edge of the field there. Just using a little bit of the greeny colour just over the top of that blue. It just creates like a grey sort of tone, mid-tone, down through the centre of the painting. Quite happy with all of that now. Just need to let that dry. It's the big thing with watercolour paper, painting. You know, you've just got to be patient and just wait for things to dry. And the downside of doing a demo like this is that there's a tendency to rush, because you're obviously looking at the clock, the timer. And I'm obviously aware that it can just sort of drag on too much, and I'm not very good at the editing side of things. So in an ideal world, I'd edit the painting and the time down a little bit. But anyway, let's put the little brush down, move to the medium-sized brush again. And again, I'm just using the purple mix colour, and just to create the illusion, if you like, of all the small branches. I'm just using the old trick, watercolour trick, of just putting a tone colour like that, just to create the impression of lots of small branches here and create the shape of the tree. Nice bit of kitchen roll in that hand, just to deal with any splashes, any unwanted splashes. Tickle that out a little bit, so that's starting to dry nicely now. I just want to make this area here just a little bit darker, using some of that dark green colour. Again, it's just lemon yellow with a little bit of neutral tint, and just going to put in some darker greens just over the top of this tree line. Dry brush it a little bit. Dry brush just means basically take the liquid off, so it's just now gently going into the colour above. So again, it's starting to create this sense of aerial perspective. leaving little gaps there, just so it looks like the snow's sort of just drifted up there and it's in the shadow. Well, I've got this colour on here, I'm just going to make this tree a little bit darker. It's always easier to make it darker, always harder to make it lighter. Not impossible, but harder. Just thinking that perhaps another branch or two through there. As you can see, all different directions, coming out from all different spots in the tree and the trunk. They just don't come out left and right, you know, they're going to come out from the centre, from the other side. So you just need to be aware of that. There's this danger that a tree just sort of comes out left and right and then sort of looks a little bit childish. Okay, so now over to the dark purple again. Now I'm going to make this now strong. I don't want too much water in it. It's going to be mostly paint. So it's a mix of the red and the ultramarine blue. Nice and dark. And then just here we've got, great for adding a little bit of scale in. Figures just walking back towards the farmhouse there. Okay, so there's a couple of figures there. Just anchor them down with a little bit of sort of shadow. A little bit more of the blue. This is pretty much pure ultramarine blue. So I think they've got a couple of dogs with them actually. They always have dogs, don't they? They do in my pictures, there we go. A few more darker tones around there. I'm just going to make another darker tone. You know, I'm not really thinking about colour, I'm just using everything that's left in the palette now just to create more of these darker branches coming out through here. If you struggle, turn it upside down and then bring them out this way. Especially if you're right-handed, well, or left-handed, just turn it around the other way. Working upside down, it's so much easier to bring all these little branches out than trying to struggle awkwardly pushing the brush. You always want to be pulling the brush, so pulling it out from the centre. Don't struggle and make it hard for yourself. Always find the easiest way to do it. A little bit more dark colour just through there, just again, just to add a little bit of tone in. Dark branch. Now an option, white gouache. That designer's gouache. Clean brush. You know, if there's something you just want to bring back, or you want to sort of add some snow in on some of the branches or something like that, you could use acrylic, but I prefer to use a little bit of white gouache if I'm going to do this. And again, you can just add little bits of white right at the end, really. Don't be tempted to use the white and mix it. Just use it pure. Just to add in little dashes of snow on top of these bushes here. Perhaps on the odd branch on the tree. You might have to go over twice with it just to sort of really get the whiteness. You'll never get it as good as the white of the paper, but it is effective. There was a time a few years ago I'd have I'd have hissed at people using gouache, but I have to say, Turner used it, so if it was good enough for Turner, it was good enough for me. Okay, there it is, pretty much. You could add in a few other little bits if you want. You know, there's always a crow flying around somewhere or something like that. Just don't be tempted to overdo it. You know, there's always this danger of wanting to fiddle. You know, sometimes less is more, and keep it simple. Hope you've enjoyed this quick 40-minute demo, and it inspires you to get your paints out yourself and have another go at the watercolours. Adios amigos, happy lockdown.